Hi BookTube, Aaron here, hope you're doing okay. For today's tag, I'm going to be doing the Canterbury Tales Book Tag, which was created by AJ from AJ Dunn Reads and Writes, and I was very kindly tagged by Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, and I'll have both their videos linked down in the description. And this is a tag based on the Canterbury Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, and a few people who've done this tag have gone into whether they've read the Canterbury Tales or not, and I actually haven't read the whole of the Canterbury Tales all the way through. I've just read what I have here, which is the first, not the first 15 tales, but 15 tales from the Canterbury Tales and the general prologue as well. And this was pretty much all I needed to get through university. It had all the Chaucer I needed for university. But coincidentally, actually, out of the possible prompts for this tag, I've only prepared answers for 15. So we have 15 prompts for the 15 tales that I have here. So without further ado, let's get into the prompts themselves. So the first is the host. The host is the character who relates the tales to the reader. He is large, loud and merry. Recommend a Mammoth book, 800 pages or more, for March of the Mammoths. So I've just made a video recently where I was going into what I loved about War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy, so I'd recommend that. This was my Mammoth for this year. I thought I'd go out on a limb, and instead of really recommending a Mammoth for March of the Mammoths, instead I'd show you what I'm hoping to read next year for March of the Mammoths, which is a book I don't know too much about, but it just sort of caught my attention, and it's called the Strudloff Steps by Heimito von Dodderer, and yeah, I don't know that much about it, so I thought I'd just read the back to you now and see what it's like. So here we go. The Strudloff Steps is an unsurpassed portrait of Vienna in the early 20th century, a vast novel crowded with characters ranging from an elegant alcoholic Prussian aristocrat to an innocent ingenue to respectable shopkeepers and tireless sexual adventurers, bohemians, grifters and honest working class folk. The greatest character in the book, however, is Vienna, which Heimito von Dodderer renders as distinctly as James Joyce does Dublin or Alfred Dublin does Berlin. Interweaving two time periods, 1908 to 1911 and 1923 to 1925, the novel takes the monumental eponymous outdoor double staircase as a governing metaphor for its characters' intersecting and diverging fates. The Strudloff Steps is an experimental tour de force with the suspense and surprise of a soap opera. Here, Dodderer illuminates the darkness of passing years with the dazzling extravagance that is uniquely his. So there we go, my Mammoth for 2023, potentially. So I'll have to wait until March 2023 to see how that one goes. Number 2, the Knight. So the Knight stands for fighting, war and bravery. Recommend a book with a courageous main character. And I thought I'd go with the character Cuchulainn from the Táin, which is part of the Ulster cycle, so an Irish story cycle. And it's the story of a cattle raid, and the defending army have all fallen asleep because of a curse, and Cuchulainn is the one hero who hasn't fallen prey to this curse, and he's single-handedly holding off this raiding army. And yeah, he's a really memorable, really out there character. He's sort of like the Incredible Hulk, and it goes into a bit of a fighting frenzy. And yeah, there's some other really memorable characters in the Táin as well, like Queen Maeve, the queen of the raiding army. She's pretty memorable as well. Then number 3, The Wife of Bath, stands for marriage, sex and arguing. Tell us about a book with a strong female character. Well, certainly when thinking of marriage, sex and arguing, Queen Maeve from the Toyne comes to mind. But for a strong female character, I thought I'd go with a character from a middle grade book, I suppose. Maybe because that's an age group where having such a strong character seems quite important and quite sort of enriching and encouraging. So I went with Wildwood by Colin Malloy with illustrations by Carson Ellis. And the main character in this Prue is everything you want in a sort of middle grade sort of a fantasy adventure book. I think when it's sort of sketched out, the story is more or less Labyrinth, like the film with David Bowie in it. There's lots of fun individual stuff in here, and I think Prue as a growing character is not just only strong, but kind of shows a kind of strength that can grow and develop, which is quite cool. Then skipping forward to number 6, the prioress is modest, quiet and compassionate. Recommend a book that you didn't hear much about on BookTube. And I thought I'd go with Enfant Terrible by Jean Cocteau. And this is a weird little surreal book, I suppose, about a brother and sister, and they have this room which is just this sort of weird version. It's kind of how they cope with life, and they kind of go into a weird, it's not really a frenzy, I think that word's in my head because of the Toyne, but they just inhabit this weird headspace. You never really know what's going on when they're in the room, and I think that ambiguity kind of annoys some readers, and so reviews can be a bit mixed. But I thought it was really good, and I haven't really seen many people talk about it when they're on BookTube, but it's a fun one. Then number 7, The Monk. The monk cares little for the rule of work and prayer. Tell us about an unconventional character. So for my unconventional character, I'm going to a book I'm reading at the moment, which is The Imposter and Other Stories by Silvina Ocampo. And in one of the stories here, there's a story called Autobiography of Irene, which is about a girl and then a woman who can't really remember things but can see the future. So one of the examples in the story is that when she looks out the window and she sees kids on their way to school, in the next second she sees them as adults, and she feels like she's killed her father. And I think eventually her family feel like she's killed her father because she knew in the lead up to his death that he was going to die, and maybe because of stuff that was going on in the family, that she kind of almost wished him to death, and her ability to see into the future kind of led her to believe that. But I suppose one of the things that then also adds to her unconventional ness is that she's really pious. She has an icon in her room, and so that together with this foresight, it kind of gives her this weird otherworldly characteristic, and as she kind of goes on in her life, she seems to kind of set herself apart from the rest of the world. She's kind of waiting to die because she thinks when she dies she'll be able to remember, and so she's very weird, and she's off in her own little bubble, and there are lots of characters like that in her stories. I think lots of her stories are outcasts, and they have some kind of strange ability, a kind of uncanny sense to them. Yeah, that's one of the more memorable ones. Then number 8 is the Friar. The Friar is all about confession. Confess to us. Have you read the Bible, Torah, Quran, or any other religious text all the way through? So the only religious text I've read all the way through is the Bible. Read that a couple of times all the way through. Although, yeah, there are always bits that I wish I would retain a little bit better. And then number 9, the Summoner. The Summoner is lecherous and a drunk who tries to sound more educated than he is. Tell us about a book that sounded better than it was. And I was thinking of Madoc Mystery by Paul Muldoon. And it's really supposed to be about Samuel Taylor Coleridge and Robert Southey, so 2 romantic poets, going off to found a utopian community in America. And they never did it, although it's something they did plan to do in real life. So this is asking the question of, what if they actually got around to doing this? And for me, it just didn't go deep enough into that. You don't really get much of a much insight into what that community might have looked like, at least not as much as I would have liked, and instead goes off into some other directions that I wasn't expecting. But I suppose that the one thing as well is I had my own assumptions about this book, because I've enjoyed other Muldoon collections in the past, and usually he's baffling because he draws sources for his poems from all over the place, but there's an emotional undercurrent underneath, and this didn't really have that emotional undercurrent, so sort of doubled with not going deep enough into what the society was like. It also just didn't have the usual Muldoon pull that it usually has, but it's still an interesting read nonetheless. Number 10, The Parson. The Parson is poor but rich in thoughts and deeds. Tell us about a book that gave you more than you expected. And this might be on my mind because Mark Nash was talking about this, and I saw him talking about it earlier on BookTube, and this is The Membranes by Chi-Ta Wei, translated by Ari Larissa Heinrich. And this is a sort of dystopian novel, and because of climate change, mankind are living under the ocean in these glass domes, and our main character works as a dermal care technician, like a beautician, and she's going to see her mother for the first time in 20 years, and I was expecting it just to be more of a sort of coming of age story almost, but in this dystopian setting, and it was actually much deeper and much darker than I was expecting, and there's definitely lots of layers and interesting things going on in there. So yeah, much more going on in here than I thought, and it's not a very big book either. So yeah, it's a really good one. Then skipping on to number 16, The Shipman is a wine-stealing rascal. Tell us about a side character who steals the spotlight. And I think it's the same for quite a lot of people who have read this book. I'm going with The Master and Margarita by Mikhail Bulgakov. And as you can tell by the cover, there's the cat there, and the cat is called Behemoth or Behemoth. And I think particularly in the second half of the book, once he's given more time to speak, he's just a really fun, infectious character, and I'm kind of sad there wasn't more of him. he was lots of fun, and obviously more or less every copy of The Master and Margarita has a cat on the cover, so I think for everyone that's one of the main features of the book, even if he's not really the main character at all. but it's definitely one of the most fun elements of the book. Okay, then number 17, the physician. The physician knows what ails and what can cure it. Tell us about a book you consider a comfort read. And for me, I suppose it's one book really, but it's split in two. So we have Seamus Heaney's New Selected Poems. We've got 2 volumes, so his earlier stuff and his later stuff. And I could open either of these up to a random page and just fall straight in and just be at home with it really. And even though sometimes he writes about heavier stuff, there's just something about the way he writes his poems that he just has a voice that just makes everything okay. Then number 19, the Reeve. The Reeve is believable on the outside but lies on the inside. What book was different than what the blurb led you to believe? And for this one I have The Traitor's Niche by Ismail Kadari. And again, I'll read you the blurb for this since, and then we'll see how it's different. So the blurb goes, at the heart of the Ottoman Empire, in the main square of Constantinople, a niche is carved into ancient stone. Here the Sultan displays the severed heads of his adversaries. Tundaj Hata, the imperial courier, is charged with transporting heads to the capital, a task that he performs with fervour. But as he travels through obscure and impoverished territories, he makes money from illicit sideshows, offering the villagers the spectacle of death. The head of the rebellious Albanian governor would fetch a very high price. And so you can tell from that blurb and from the cover as well, that maybe much of this story is going to be about this courier and about the communities that he's travelling through. And although many of the parts that stick in my mind from the book are relating that, it is the courier doing that, there's a lot of this book which isn't that, and that is kind of going to the heads of other characters in other places. So a large part of it is one of the attendants at the Traitor's Niche, so the person whose job it is to keep an eye on this column where the heads are being displayed, and to look after the head and stuff like that. And then it goes on to this rebellious Albanian governor as well then, and it kind of goes into his situation. And it's only after then you've had their points of view that then, as things go on, we meet the courier. And so although towards the end of the book it really is what is going on in the blurb, there's a lot there that's just left out, and so you're kind of scratching your head a bit as to, am I really reading the same book when you get to the beginning? But it's still a really good one. Then number 20, The Ploughman. So The Ploughman is good-hearted and faithful. What book do you read over and over again? And I find this quite a hard one, because although I do reread from time to time, I'm not necessarily a person who will reread a book over and over again. And I was trying to think of an occasion where I finished a book and I more or less just started it straight again after I'd finished it. I suppose it's easier to do that with a poetry collection sometimes. So the one that really stood out for me is this. It's called Stowaway, a Levantine Adventure by Richard Gwynne. And it really is what it says on the tin. It's poems about the Levant, the Eastern Mediterranean, and we have a character moving through that geography, but also moving kind of through time as well. So you're getting a real sense and flavour of the place and of the countless sort of atrocities and turmoils that have sort of shaken that area. And then you get to the end, and then you maybe realise that there's something deeper for this character that might have happened, and then you kind of want to go back to the beginning. And it's one of those collections where I think even if you have read it a million times and you really get what each poem is doing, you'd still get to the end of the last poem and feel like, oh, I've missed something, even if you haven't. It's, at least for me, it's a very easy one to reread. Then skipping on to number 22, The cook makes the food that feeds you. Tell us about a book that feeds your soul. And a few months ago, I think it was last summer now, I read for the first time Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke, and it was my first time reading this, and it was really, really lovely. And I might try and reread it this year as well, because I think it would really benefit from that. But I was also thinking of a short story by Chekhov called Gooseberries, which it just makes me feel good. I was wondering about that one as well. Then number 23, The Yeoman. The Yeoman Serves You. Tell us about a book that served its purpose, that did what you wanted it to. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. And I was thinking of Sir Harry Hotspur of Humblethwaite by Anthony Trollope. It kind of is what you kind of expect when you read the back. It's about a father who's worried that his daughter is going to marry a rake, and that's really what they don't need, because they don't really have as much money as they would like. So although they have the land, it's all the kind of stereotypes really. So it kind of it's entertaining, but it's not amazing. And then we have number 25, which is The Nun's Priest. So the Nun's Priest is witty and doesn't take himself too seriously. Recommend a book that has a funny or witty main character. And I was thinking of Sophie Feathers from Nights at the Circus by Angela Carter. And I think it's really testament to how entertaining this main character is. The fact that I thought that this whole book was a first-person narration, at least from memory. And just when I got this book down for the tag, I was just flicking through and I realised that the whole book is in third person, which just kind of shows how entertaining this main character is, how funny, and she comes across as very funny and talkative and quite cheeky, and you get to the end of it and you feel like you've really got to know her, and you feel like she's been telling a story, even if the whole story isn't told through her voice. I think I really need to reread that soon. I've been trying to and I haven't got round to it for quite some time. But there we go. There are my answers for the Canterbury Tales Book Tag. I hope you found some of that fun or interesting, or at least slightly noteworthy. But that's that for now. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon. Bye.